To most, Christmas is a joyous time of year to spend time with family and friends, a time for laughter and happiness. But for one family, it only brings misery, sadness, and terrible memories. A story that still plagues the entire world to this day. Welcome to Seeking Answers, and this is the unsolved murder mystery of JonBenét Ramsey. John Ramsey was a businessman and the president of a computer system company by the name of Access Graphics. His first marriage sadly ended in divorce in 1978, and although he had 2 children from this relationship, a son and a daughter, they lived elsewhere. Though the daughter, Elizabeth, sadly passed away in 1992 from a horrific car accident. John ended up remarrying to a woman named Patsy, and they had a son together in 1987, naming him Burke, followed by a daughter, JonBenét, in 1990 in their Atlanta, Georgia home. However, just a year after their second child was born, the family moved to Boulder, Colorado, where the headquarters of Access Graphics was located. At quite a young age, Patsy often entered her daughter JonBenét into numerous beauty pageants in the area, where she won many competitions and became quite a big name locally. But on Christmas Day in 1996, the family went to bed like any other night, not suspecting anything, completely unaware of the horror that was about to take place. Just 2 days before Christmas, the Ramsey family hosted a Christmas party in their home with around 30 guests attending. At around 6:47 p.m., someone in the household placed a 911 call to the police. But once the dispatcher picked up, the mysterious person hung up the phone without saying a word. The police immediately returned the call but only got the answering machine. At 6:54, an officer actually arrived at the house to ensure that everything was okay, and once they were dismissed and assured that there was no emergency, they left the property without incident at 7:09. The reason for this mysterious call has never been identified. On Christmas Eve, John Ramsey picked up a new silver bike from his neighbor's garage and at 9 p.m. placed it under their tree for his daughter JonBenét to find in the morning, as well as retrieving other extra gifts from the basement. On Christmas Day, around 5 or 6 p.m, it's uncertain exactly when, the Ramseys attended a Christmas party at their friends Priscilla White and her husband Fleet. The couple claimed that the Ramseys appeared perfectly happy and nothing out of the ordinary happened at this event.
You believe when you came home from Fleet White's house and put the children to bed that this intruder was already in your house?
Absolutely.
Once home, the time is uncertain, but John and Patsy put their children to bed. But one thing is for sure, 10 p.m. was the final time anyone would see JonBenét Ramsey alive. John was the last to see her alive in bed around this time. Not long after, sometime between 10 and 10:30, Patsy herself went to bed around the same time as her husband John. They both claimed they weren't disturbed or awakened at all during the entire night. Despite these claims, however, Scott Gibbons, a neighbor, claimed that at midnight he saw that the Ramseys had some of their upper kitchen lights on. He also claimed that he believes he saw people inside, under dimmed lights, sneaking around as if to prevent waking up others in the house, so he merely shrugged it off. Though Patsy later claimed they were always really bad with leaving lights on, though Scott claims he never noticed them doing this before. Melody Stanton, another neighbor, actually claims to have heard a scream at some point between midnight and 2 a.m. The Ramsey family woke up early on Boxing Day as they were starting their family vacation and needed a fly to Charlevoix, Michigan, claiming to have awoken at 5:30. Though a neighbor, Stuart Long, claims he saw John up and crossing his hallway 15 minutes earlier. While John took a shower, Patsy got herself ready, but much to her horror, she discovered an incredibly lengthy 2.5-page, extremely detailed, handwritten ransom note on the bottom of the kitchen staircase. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory. SBTC. The initials SBTC to this day remain a mystery. The meaning of these letters have never been discovered. The only people in the house at the time, to our knowledge, was Patsy, her husband John, and their son Burke. Unfortunately, Patsy did not read the entire letter. She simply read the first few lines and screamed in a panic before checking JonBenét's room to see that it was empty. John rushed to her rescue before they both checked on their son. John then read the entirety of the note and, disregarding the threat, he still told Patsy to call the police at 5:52 a.m. before alerting friends and family.
911 emergency. Police. What's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was this?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey, I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
Okay, I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been
No,
gone?
I don't. Please, we just got
God, Alfie, is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay,
Please, there's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath.
Please, hurry.
Patsy?
Did that concern you? It says 2 men are watching your daughter. You even talked to a stray dog.
No.
She's dead.
I would have called the Army if I could have.
But they pulled up in a police cruiser.
Well, they didn't know what was going on exactly, and so I don't fault them for that.
Within 3 minutes, police had already arrived at the home before searching the entire house, waking up Burke but finding absolutely no sign of forced entry. Officer Rick French checked out the basement but found himself at a door secured by a wooden latch. He hesitated before walking away. If he would have opened this door, he would have found something truly horrifying. But French claimed that he was simply looking for an exit route of the kidnapper, but since the latch was closed from his side, it ruled it out completely, which is why he left. What's bizarre about this note is not only the sheer length of it and detail, but the precise amount of $118,000 requested for her return. This was almost the exact value of John's annual work bonus that year. In addition to certain things written in the note, it's fairly obvious that the author knew John personally. This led to some investigators considering employees of John's who may have known of his bonus total, while others believe it was just a coincidence, or a possible religious reference to Psalm 118, which states, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever." Furthermore, the notepad used suggested that the perpetrator had previously written a practice letter, and part of one was actually found. But the letter was also filled with several spelling mistakes and grammatical errors with an overuse of punctuation. But it was also concluded that not only was this note incredibly long for a ransom note, but it was actually written inside the house at the scene of the crime with the Ramseys' own pen. But it came up with no fingerprints outside of Patsy's and the authorities who had handled it. This led investigators to initially point the blame to Patsy Ramsey herself. Michael Baden, a forensic pathologist, claimed that in his 60 years experience, he had never seen a ransom note quite like this before, and he believed it wasn't written by an outside stranger. However, the handwriting was analysed and compared to both parents. John was completely ruled out, but Patsy's came back as inconclusive. However, many believe it looks like a nearly identical match. Experts have even said that the first page shows that the writing was clearly slow, awkward and sloppy, while in the last two it becomes more fluid and natural, leading them to believe it was someone trying to disguise their real handwriting. However, they believe it's extremely difficult to hide your natural habits of handwriting, and you can only usually change your style for around a paragraph or so. And other experts do admit there is a lot of similarities between Patsy's handwriting and the ransom note.
This document, for the record, contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 letters that are side by side, vertically on the page. Now I'm going to ask you, Mrs. Ramsey, if you can identify any of these letters as being your handwriting.
No, sir. Okay. Well, they're both lowercase b's.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything about the B's that to you looks similar, beside the fact that they're lowercase, the way they're drawn?
No, I don't think they look alike.
Okay.
I don't think they look a thing alike.
All right.
I don't think they look alike.
All right. Fair enough.
And they're like two different letters to me.
Does that look like her handwriting?
Honestly, looking at that, she would always bug me about having good handwriting, and she would like make me rewrite stuff to try to get me to have good handwriting, and I think it's too sloppy.
No further investigation on Patsy was done, as there was simply no supportive evidence. John began to make arrangements to actually pay the money until a forensics team arrived at the house, but as they believed she had been kidnapped, JonBenét's bedroom was the only room cordoned off to prevent contamination of evidence. However, absolutely no precautions were taken to prevent the same being done to the rest of the house. The police later claimed that they made no effort to protect evidence elsewhere, as they had absolutely no reason to believe that JonBenet was still inside the family home. Many family members and friends arrived to support the Ramseys, but due to the sheer amount of people now in the house, many picked up things or cleaned surfaces, destroying possible evidence. Boulder detective Linda Arndt arrived at 8 a.m. the next morning, prepared for the kidnapper's phone call with further instructions, but the phone call never came, and nobody attempted to claim the money.
How did he strike you?
Cordial.
Cordial?
Mm-hmm.
Upset?
Cordial.
Distraught?
Cordial.
Did it strike you at all that that was behavior that was unusual for somebody whose child was just kidnapped?
It's been my experience that people respond to trauma in different ways. So if someone has a response that is different from mine, I don't put judgment to it, I'll just note it.
I don't remember being cordial. She was there to help me. I was grateful for her being there. So she interpreted that as being cordial. So be it. She had never been in a situation like that as a police officer, I learned later.
Linda Arndt admitted that the behavior from the Ramseys seemed odd from the very beginning. For one, Burke never even got out of bed, even when his mother burst into his room in a panic and crying. He even remained there when police officers started searching his bedroom with a flashlight.
It seems really odd to me that you're 9 years old and your mother comes in the room in seemingly the middle of the night because it's dark and says, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" And then runs out of the room and you just lay there, as opposed to getting up and going out and saying, "What's going on?" And then a police officer comes in your room, which I assume is the first time in your entire life that a police officer has come in your room with a flashlight looking around, and you still just stay in bed.
To be fair, I didn't know it was a police officer. It's just kind of...
But somebody comes in your room with a flashlight, and you never get up and say, "What is going on here?"
I guess I kind of like to avoid conflict, or I don't know, I guess I just felt safer there.
Critics would say you weren't curious because you already knew. He didn't have to get up and go check because he knew exactly what had happened.
I was scared, I think. I mean, I didn't know if there's some bad guy downstairs my dad was chasing off with a gun, or, I had no idea.
Furthermore, during her time in the house, she noticed that John and Patsy separated and remained in different rooms the entire time. And John just seemed a lot calmer than expected, considering his daughter was missing. He even stopped to casually check his mail at one point.
Isn't it possible maybe he was opening the mail looking for a clue from the kidnapper?
I don't know.
I was looking for another communication from the kidnapper. The police should have done that. But they observed me doing it, and so John was so cold and callous that he was going through the mail looking at his bill, so that's nonsense.
But even more eerily, the kidnapper gave 10 a.m. as a deadline. But once that time passed and no phone call arrived, nobody in the house panicked or even mentioned the time allocated.
10 o'clock comes and goes, and there's no acknowledgement within the house from anyone that the deadline imposed by the author of the Ransom Note has come and gone.
Nobody said it's 10 o'clock and the kidnappers haven't called?
Nobody said that.
Was that something else you took note of?
Absolutely.
It wasn't until 1 p.m. when Detective Arndt asked John Ramsey and the aforementioned Fleet White to search the house again to try to find more evidence. But she also made it perfectly clear that if they do find any, they shouldn't touch anything in order to maintain the clues. Weirdly, John immediately went straight to the basement without hesitation.
Why start there?
It's the most logical entry point.
And that's when he came across the same door that Rick French had previously ignored. John opened it to sadly discover the deceased body of his 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét Ramsey. Her mouth was covered with duct tape, a nylon cord was around her wrists and neck, and her torso was covered by a blanket. The basement window was broken, but this wasn't actually odd. John had previously forgotten his keys and had been locked out of the house. He had to break the basement window and climb through to regain access to his home. What he did find odd, however, was that the window was left open, and a suitcase was underneath, as if somebody had used it for height as an escape. Despite Aunt's precise instructions, John still picked up his daughter and took her upstairs, now contaminating the crime scene and possibly destroying even more evidence.
When I found her, it was a rush of relief. And then, of course, within moments, I realized that she probably was dead. But she was back in my arms.
And I see John Ramsey carrying JonBenét up the last 3 steps from the basement. And my mind exploded. And everything that I had noted that morning that stuck out instantly made sense. I ordered him to put JonBenét down. I knelt next to her and I leaned down to her face. And John leaned down opposite me. And his face was just inches from mine. And we had a nonverbal exchange that I will never forget. And he asked if she was dead. And I said, yes, she's dead. And I told him to go back to the room and to dial 911. And as we looked at each other, I remember, and I wore a shoulder holster, tucking my gun right next to me and consciously counting, I've got 18 bullets.
Why did you do that?
Because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when people showed up. I'd said everything made sense in that instance. I knew what happened.
Do you think your fear was well-founded?
You bet I do. There's no doubt in my mind.
To this day?
Never wavered.
You were afraid because you thought the killer was still in the house.
I knew it.
She was counting the bullets that she had on her body, and she had 18 bullets because she feared she might have to shoot her way out of there.
Frightening and incompetent, beyond incompetent.
Within the first couple of weeks following the death, all 3 members of the family went through extensive interviews, including 9-year-old Burke, and they also provided handwriting, blood, and hair samples for DNA analysis. Burke was questioned just days after the killing, completely without his parents' knowledge or consent, and his behavior and responses to the questions were analyzed by a child psychologist.
The observations that were leaked to the press was that it was unusual that you felt safe, that you showed little warmth towards the family, that you displayed an enormous lack of emotion and almost an indifference, and you had difficulty opening up about the family, similar to children who feel that there are things they shouldn't say. You drew a father, a mother, yourself, that JonBenét was not in the picture at all. And you said that you were, quote, getting on with life. Do you remember saying that?
I don't remember saying that.
The autopsy concluded that JonBenét was murdered through strangulation and received a skull fracture that was 8.5 inches long. A heavy flashlight was found in the home, as well as a baseball bat outside the house which belonged to Burke, which even had some fibers from the basement carpet still on it.
Did you hit your sister over the head with a baseball bat or a flashlight?
Absolutely not.
There was no evidence of rape, though possible sexual assault couldn't be ruled out. Some who saw the body actually believed that it showed previous signs of sexual abuse, believing that whoever did this had been sexually molesting JonBenét for a while. But there has been no definitive evidence of this, and JonBenét's own doctor said they didn't notice any such thing before her death.
Did you ever have any knowledge or suspicion that JonBenét had been sexually abused or molested in any way?
No.
Did you ever sexually abuse JonBenét?
No.
No semen was found, but there was evidence to suggest that she had some kind of vaginal injury, with further evidence to suggest that the area had been wiped with a cloth afterwards.
I kind of always thought it was like a pedophile who saw her at one of the pageants and snuck in.
JonBenét was a pedophile's dream come true. I believe he brought her down to the farthest, deepest part of that basement and did very brutal things to her.
JonBenét was the ultimate sex abuse victim. She was killed for it.
The nylon cord was tied around the broken handle of a paintbrush to strangle her to death, and parts of the bristle end of the brush were found in Patsy's art supplies, but the bottom third of it was never discovered. Her body also had two strange marks which caused speculation, many believing it resembled the marks left from a stun gun, which they believed may have been used to take JonBenét quietly into the basement. Furthermore, some pineapple was discovered inside her stomach, suggesting that she had eaten it just hours before her death. There was a bowl of pineapple on the kitchen table with a spoon on it the night before her body was discovered, but neither John nor Patsy remember putting this out or feeding her the fruit. Regardless of this, Patsy's fingerprints were on the bowl, and there was a tall glass next to it which had Burke's fingerprints on it, despite the family claiming that he slept through the entire night and was only awoken by the police searching his room for his sister. And his favourite snack was pineapple.
I didn't put the bowl there, okay? I did not put the bowl there. I would not do this, set it like this.
Okay, those prints belong to one of the two of you.
They did? You sure?
Did you and she eat pineapple together at any time during the day?
Maybe. Like, I don't remember specifically eating pineapple, but very well could have. Like, would you remember eating pineapple 20 years ago? Like, you know.
However, some call this story into question as they believe they can actually hear Burke's voice in the background of Patsy's 911 call, which the family wholeheartedly denies. Furthermore, the phone call has a really mysterious ending to it, many believing that Patsy only thought she hung up the phone when she actually didn't, and you can hear parts of a conversation in the background.
Take a deep breath. Hurry. Patsy.
Many have made their own interpretations over the years to what is actually being said.
Where were you when that phone call was made?
It's in my bed.
Was Burke in the kitchen when that 911 call was made?
No.
Were you there when that call was made?
No.
So you were not there and you did not speak those words?
That's correct.
You can hear what is clearly keystrokes of a computer as that 911 operator continued, I'm sure, to fill out the report. I had it tested. There's no voice on there that's Burke Ramsey's.
The call was tested by independent labs. They determined that there was no voice at the end of the tape. There has never been credible investigation of the 911 tape that discovered any voices.
Naturally, the Ramseys were the immediate suspects, specifically John and Patsy.
I know who killed JonBenét. There's no doubt in my mind who killed JonBenét.
We have trace evidence that appears to link you to the death of JonBenét. What would you tell me?
Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it. John Ramsey didn't do it, and we didn't have a clue of anybody who did do it.
Mr. Ramsey, did you kill JonBenét?
No, I did not.
Mrs. Ramsey, did you kill your daughter?
No, I did not kill my daughter. They're just lies. They just lie.
We knew within fairly short order that the police were not competent, that they were focused on us, that there wasn't going to be an investigation.
You must have conjured something in your head for you to come out and call me a murderer of my child.
To those of you who may want to ask, let me address very directly, I did not kill my daughter, JonBenét.
Let me assure you that I did not kill JonBenét. I did not have anything to do with it. I love that child with my whole of my heart and soul.
But by October the following year, over 1,600 people were now being questioned. So much evidence was tampered with and so many mistakes made during the initial investigation that the entire case was incredibly complicated to handle and damn near impossible to solve.
And he says, could you please cover her body? And as he's saying it, he's already put the blanket on top of her.
You had to know that that was going to contaminate evidence.
JonBenét's body was in and of itself a crime scene. Would it be nice if John hadn't found JonBenét? Absolutely. And would it be nice if he hadn't put a blanket? Yeah, it would be great. And it would be nice if there were other people to help control and keep people away. That would have been wonderful. But that's not the circumstances that I had available that day.
It's worth noting, in 2000, Patsy and John both took independent polygraph tests to prove that they were innocent and telling the truth. The first test came back inconclusive, but they willingly took a second one, and it determined that they were telling the truth and weren't trying to actively manipulate the test. However, polygraph tests are around 97% effective and not concrete. They aren't admissible in a court of law and couldn't be used as evidence. The FBI, however, requested for them to administer a lie detector test themselves, and the Ramseys refused. They felt like the police department had targeted them from the beginning, and agreeing to this test would only give them more opportunity to sabotage them and paint them as murderers. Alex Hunter, the district attorney, admitted that they at the police department had intentionally spread false information to the media to deliberately put pressure on the Ramseys in order to try to get a confession out of them, instead of searching for another killer. In fact, after the death, the police even refused to give the Ramseys the body of their daughter, threatening to hold it hostage until they agreed to more interviews and answered the questions they wanted. But this never went further. The case primarily focused on the two parents, which led other officials to believe that they were now not searching in the right area, completely ruling out the possibility of an intruder and not giving that theory the rightful investigation. 3 years after the incident, the grand jury actually tried to charge the Ramseys for child abuse, for recklessly placing their child at risk, which led to her death, as well as obstructing a murder investigation. However, there was merely just not enough evidence, and these charges were later dropped. It wasn't until 2003, 7 years after the murder, when new technology allowed forensic investigators to extract enough material from a mixed blood sample found in JonBenét's underwear to actually establish a DNA profile. This DNA belonged to an unknown male, and it did not belong to any member of the Ramsey family. The DNA was submitted to the FBI's combined DNA index system, which contained more than 1.6 million DNA profiles, but it still didn't match a single profile there. It wasn't until October 2016, 20 years after she was murdered, new technology with more sensitive techniques revealed that the DNA contained genetic markers from 2 individuals other than JonBenét herself. There was also male DNA found on the cord and paintbrush, as well as 6 separate other DNA samples belonging to unknown individuals. Several members of the FBI believed that since these DNA samples appeared in several different places on multiple surfaces, they did in fact belong to the killer. However, others believe that DNA can get on places and clothing from completely innocent means, and this evidence does not 100% prove that it was a stranger who killed this child. The biggest sign was that there was no forced entry or exit, but there was evidence of staging the scene, which was the very unconvincing ransom note. The police also didn't believe that the Ramseys were very cooperative in helping them try to solve the case, but the family claimed they were only reluctant to help because they were scared this wouldn't be an investigation for an intruder and kidnapping, but they would just be accused of murdering their own daughter. One popular theory is that Patsy hit JonBenét in a fit of rage after she had wet the bed, which was a frequent occurrence, and then strangled her to cover up what had happened after mistakenly believing that she was already dead. However, Patsy had absolutely no history of anger problems whatsoever.
Did your daughter have a bedwetting incident that night? Did you get up? Did you get angry? And did you hurt her?
No, I did not. I don't know what else to say. How else do you say no except no?
That you ever saw your mother fly into a rage?
No.
Did you ever see her throw anything?
No.
Did you ever see her break anything in a fit of anger? Smash anything down?
No.
Dishes, lamps?
No.
Throw anything at your father?
No.
She wasn't into corporal punishment. She didn't
No.
spank y'all.
No,
She
we never
didn't
got,
hit you.
yeah, we didn't get spanked.
Although it's often been questioned whether or not JonBenét was actually as passionate in this whole beauty pageant scene, or if it was all pressure from her mother Patsy and she was possibly unhappy with her daughter's recent performances.
People try to make it seem ugly and something that it wasn't, and I just know how much fun it was. What a good time we had together.
Were you naive about letting her compete in pageants?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But your lesson was, what if we inadvertently exposed her to the killer?
Obviously, you don't want to keep them locked in the house, but it's just an awareness. Not everyone around you is a nice, good person.
Burke was interviewed, and it was believed that the family had a perfectly healthy and caring relationship. Burke was never considered a key suspect in any of the case. The family even offered a $100,000 reward for any information on who killed their child. But others believe that this was just a ploy to cover up their own dastardly actions. Another theory was that Burke hit his sister in the head with a heavy object, probably not intending to kill her, and the letter was from his parents to simply cover up the circumstances of her death and to protect their son. This was stated in a CBS documentary, leading to the family suing for defamation. However, it's often been disputed whether or not a 9-year-old child would truly have the brute strength in order to cause a skull fracture of this magnitude.
Do 9-year-olds sometimes kill siblings? Yes, but not with a garrote, with intricate knots tied around it, in the middle of the night in their parents' home. He didn't do it.
But in addition to the evidence of the pineapple, Burke had a history of violence towards his sister.
Did you hit your sister with a golf club?
Not on purpose. She was standing behind me and I went like that.
His favorite snack was pineapple, so one theory is that JonBenét helped herself to some, and Burke grew increasingly angry at his sister and lashed out.
There still are people that believe that you killed your sister.
Look at the evidence, or the lack thereof.
Fabricating this ransom note, if she was strangled, then causing the head injury, doing all of this cover-up was all done to protect you because they didn't want to lose 2 children. That's their theory.
I don't know if to say that because I know that's not what happened.
Did you do anything to harm your sister, JonBenét?
No.
Did you murder your sister, JonBenét?
No. Like, you won't find any evidence because that's not what happened. I know I didn't do it.
Another theory is that the murder was accidental and the strangulation was a way to deter investigators during the evidence process. However, the autopsy showed that she was actually strangled while she was still alive. The hit to the head didn't kill her. It was concluded that the hit to the head happened around 45 minutes to 2 hours before she was strangled to death. Furthermore, more inconclusive DNA was found underneath her fingernails, suggesting that she was clawing and fighting for protection, making it even more unlikely that it was someone she knew and trusted, and impossible that it was an accident. The intruder theory was mostly held together by the fact that 2 sets of unidentified boot marks were found in the basement where JonBenét's body was discovered.
There was a footprint in the mold on the ground of the basement, and the investigators thought that it was from a hiking boot.
Yeah.
Did you own any hiking boots that you might have worn in the basement at some time?
Yeah, I did. I don't remember the brand, but I remember it had a little compass on the shoelace.
And the investigators point to that footprint as evidence against you.
Yeah.
What's your response to that?
It's my house. I wouldn't play in the basement all the time with the train set, so if they determined that to be my footprint, that doesn't really prove anything.
Burke Ramsey never owned a pair of high-tech boots. So that one example shows you that I'm absolutely right when I talk about this so-called theory about Burke. Nobody in the Ramsey family owned any high-tech boots.
It was also believed that the previous stun gun marks could have actually been from a toy train track used as a weapon, which Burke owned at the time. A rope was also found by her bedroom, which didn't belong to the family, but the police often ignored evidence like this to consistently focus on members of the family instead. After all, there were no footprints found outside the house, which was covered in snow at the time, though it's important to note that there wasn't any snow at the back of the house, which is where the alleged intruder entered. In addition, as explained, 2 days prior, the family hosted a Christmas party in their home and gave guests a tour of the house. It's possible that the murderer had attended this to scout out the place and become familiar with the location, maybe even stealing the pen and pad to write the ransom note at their own home instead to try to frame them. However, it was even used as evidence against John Ramsey that the date of death on his daughter's gravestone is listed as Christmas Day, despite the fact that it's unclear when she was actually murdered. Many believing that he only put December the 25th because he knew exactly when she died, as he was responsible.
One, the killer said, "I'll call you tomorrow." I presumed he wrote the note the night of the 25th. And secondly, I didn't want people ever to forget that JonBenét was murdered on Christmas.
What do you say to the people that say you put the 25th because you knew when she died?
There's so many theories out there. I tell you why I did it. That's exactly what I just said.
Some other suspects were a neighbor, Bill McReynolds. He would often dress up as Santa Claus to entertain children, and he was present at the Christmas party just 2 days before JonBenét was murdered. And his own daughter was actually kidnapped 22 years earlier in 1974. Creepily, his own wife had previously written a play about a child being molested and then murdered in a basement. Bill had admitted that he was very close with JonBenét and he was deeply affected by her death as she had a huge impact on his life. During his escapades as Santa, JonBenét actually gave him a gift of glitter, and it meant so much to him he even took it into heart surgery with him, and he even requested the glitter to be mixed with his ashes once he passes away. But eerily, on Christmas Day, JonBenét played at her friend Megan Kostanik's house, and they began talking about Santa and what they got for Christmas this year. JonBenét claimed that Santa visited her at the Christmas party the other night, most likely referring to McReynolds. She went on to claim that Santa promised to secretly visit her again after Christmas. Megan's mother then corrected her to state that that very day was Christmas, but JonBenét insisted, no, he said he would visit me after Christmas, but it's a secret. However, no evidence was discovered to put McReynolds at the scene of the crime.
I know I didn't do it, so I'm not nervous, I'm not worried about it.
Did JonBenét ever say anything about Santa coming to see her after that party?
Not that I remember.
You don't remember anything about that?
No.
Okay. She didn't ever say she saw Santa again?
No, I don't remember her saying anything like that.
Another suspect was Gary Oliva, who lived nearby to the family. In 2000, 4 years after the tragedy, Gary was arrested for drug charges and was found with a photo of JonBenét Ramsey in his backpack. He claimed that her death deeply hurt him, as he felt she was an exceptional girl and her murder was an exceptional loss. He wanted to build a monument and a shrine to honor her memory. Furthermore, it wasn't until 2016, 20 years after the murder, Oliva was arrested for the possession of child pornography. To make matters worse, a friend of his, Michael Vale, claimed that Gary Oliva called him just a day after the murder took place, simply saying, "I hurt a little girl. I hurt a little girl." He also claimed that he did this act in none other than Boulder, Colorado. No girl other than JonBenét Ramsey was harmed in the area that night. And to add to this theory, Gary Oliva had previously tried to strangle his own mother with a telephone cord, which is very similar to JonBenét's cause of death. Despite all of this evidence, however, Gary Oliva also didn't match the DNA found at the scene and was also discarded as a possible suspect.
Did you hurt or kill JonBenét Ramsey?
No. No, I didn't.
Two other possible suspects were former family housekeeper Linda Hoffman Pugh and a man named Michael Helgoth. The latter allegedly had previously confessed to a co-worker that he had murdered JonBenét Ramsey. Unfortunately, just 2 months after the death, Helgoth committed suicide with a handgun before he could be investigated, though others call into question the true legitimacy of this being a suicide.
Police ruled it a suicide, but the gun was on the opposite side of the entry wound. Pretty difficult to kill yourself that way.
Hundreds of DNA tests were performed, hoping to find a match to the ones found at the scene of the crime, but none were successful. In addition to the boot mark, 2 windows were left slightly open, as the family had Christmas lights, using the windows to allow the electrical cords to pass through. There was also 1 unlocked door and a broken basement window. This is believed to have been the method of entry. However, a spider web was in the window which hadn't been disturbed, causing many to discard this theory, finding it absolutely impossible for someone to have opened this window without breaking the spider web. Police also claimed that the window would have been far too small for a grown person to get in or out, but an investigator visited the property and proved that it could have easily been done, though this doesn't explain the spiderweb issue. In addition to, as explained, John previously using the window himself for entrance to the house. However, it's important to note that all of the windowsills on the outside had leaves on, except for the area supposedly used to gain access to the home. But more reason people discarded the intruder theory is simply because this suggestion is that the person broke into the home, took the time to write a practice letter, discard it, write a new one, and then murder JonBenét anyway, regardless of their threat. It just would have been a huge risk to have done all of this with a sleeping family also inside the house who could wake up at any moment.
Who else would have the time, they would say, to write that intricate note and practice it beforehand, other than someone trying to cover up a crime?
However, there had been more than 100 burglaries in the neighborhood in the months before JonBenét's death, and 38 registered sex offenders lived within a 2-mile radius of the home. In 2006, a 41-year-old elementary school teacher, John Mark Carr, was arrested, and on August the 15th, he confessed to murdering JonBenét Ramsey.
I love JonBenét. Die accidentally.
He did this through email to a journalist who spoke with him back and forth for a total of 4 years just to gain his trust, acting like what he was hearing was completely normal and that it didn't bother him, before leading to Carr's confession. Carr stated that he was actually in love with the 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey. He claimed that he took her from her bed while she was still asleep and took her down to the basement. Upon waking, she was very confused and wondered where she was. He claimed that he then drugged, sexually assaulted, and then accidentally murdered her after hitting her in the head with a flashlight. However, there was absolutely no evidence to link him to the area at the time. Furthermore, Carr provided only basic facts that were public knowledge and didn't provide any convincing details to put him at the scene of the crime. The emails did contain similar wording of the ransom note, and he even referred to Patsy Ramsey's mother by her nickname, which wasn't public knowledge at the time. However, there were no drugs found in JonBenét's system, his DNA didn't match any found on her body, and the way her corpse was discovered ruled out that the death could have been accidental. That same year, Patsy Ramsey passed away from ovarian cancer at the age of 49 and was buried next to her daughter. And in 2008, John Mark Carr was arrested after trying to avoid child pornography charges. But despite his confession and this new evidence, his DNA still didn't match the crime scene and his false admittance was ignored, though the Ramseys were completely and finally ruled out as potential suspects. Despite this, Carr maintained his involvement in the murder and claimed that he didn't act alone. However, upon further investigation, it was revealed that Carr wasn't even in Colorado at the time of the murder. He was seen and even photographed in Georgia when JonBenét's life was taken. However, forensic experts also believe that the DNA found in JonBenét's underwear was unintentionally left there during the manufacturing process and not by the kidnapper. They even managed to prove this by doing the exact same test on a completely unopened bag of underwear, with the exact same successful results. Therefore, any of the previous suspects could have been responsible, and the DNA found at the scene of the crime is practically entirely useless. In 2016, Burke Ramsey had been the only one of the three who had remained silent from the public eye, and after 20 years, he finally spoke out on Dr. Phil to tell his story, but it did much more damage than good. He spoke about what he remembered on that night, but he smiled throughout the entire interview, even when discussing the horrific things that happened to his sister, and laughing at times as well. When questioned on the theory of him or his parents killing her, he reacted oddly and brushed it off awkwardly. Many believe these were signs of a creepy, weird, guilty psychopath.
This is anxiety. He's socially uncomfortable. I've seen it a lot. He's not autistic, he's not weird, he's not creepy, he's just nervous. This is a very socially awkward young man, but understand, from the time this happened, his parents, depending on your interpretation, either protected him or hid him based on how you want to interpret that. So he has not had the social contact that most kids have growing up. When you've got reporters at the end of your driveway, he couldn't go to school, and even now he works as a computer analyst in computer security, but he works remotely. He doesn't go into work every day. He's not around people, so he's not real comfortable in a social situation.
I don't see a smile as much as I see an uncomfortable facial expression, but I don't see that as smile, happy smile. I see that as uncomfortable guy.
Burke later admitted that if the police wanted him to, even though he has nothing to prove, he would happily take a lie detector test to clear his name. But since Burke has never been considered a suspect, this was never done.
I don't know anything more than what everybody else already knows.
JonBenét Ramsey stole hearts in her beauty pageants, but the end of her sadly short life has been publicized across the globe for over 20 years. Some believing it was the parents, some pointing the blame to her brother, many accusing several of the other possible suspects, some even believing that it was the work of a bitter and angry parent, jealous of JonBenét's success in the beauty pageants. While others believe it was someone competitive at John's work trying to get even. With no definitive evidence and no potential leads, it's likely that this case will never be solved, and the killer of JonBenét Ramsey will never be found, and we will forever be seeking answers.